Hi guys! Today I want to share with you the operating instructions for regular epoxy resin in this video. And I'm sharing based on the following problems that beginners often encounter. Amount of resin and mixing method. Color mixing of resin. Defoaming techniques. Prevention of resin delamination and resin type selection. Cleaning pour. Before the operation, I will show you what materials we need to prepare. 1. Resin measuring cup. 2. Stirring stick. 3. Electric resin mixer, which is more efficient. 4. Waterproof gloves. 5. Regular epoxy resin. 6. Alcohol for cleaning. 7. Mask. 8. Heat gun for removing the bubbles. 1. Amount of resin and mixing method. Mix the resin according to the amount indicated on the mold. If there is no amount marked on the mold, we can pour the water into the mold and then transfer it to the measuring cup to get the corresponding required volume. Then the resin can be adjusted within a reasonable range to avoid waste. Although the maximum pouring amount of our 1:1 epoxy resin is 400 milliliters, we still recommend mixing resin no more than 8 ounces at one time. If the amount of resin is too much, the curing reaction will be very fast and may occur flash cure. If you mix more than 8 ounces, it is recommended to store the resin in 2 cups, which can delay the reaction time of the resin. We use the 1:1 regular epoxy resin. There is a safe design cap on the resin bottle with detailed instructions on how to open it. Push down the safe design cap and then turn it counterclockwise, then you can open it easily. There is a stopper inside the cap which is used to prevent the resin from leaking. Just pull it out to use. Mix the resin 1:1 by volume. If the mixing ratio of the mixture is not correct, problems such as the resin not curing and resin bending may occur due to the different densities of the Part A and Part B resin. It's normal to see transparent silky swirls in the resin when just pouring them out. Now let's demonstrate the correct way to mix the resin. We can use a stick to stir the resin in the same direction at a constant speed during the mixing process. Please pay attention to every corner of the cup, such as the edges and the bottom of the cup. The swirls will be obvious at first, but it will slowly disappear as the mixing process continues. The mixing time is about 1 to 2 minutes. When the swirls disappear, the resin is well mixed. Use a tissue to wipe off the resin residue on the stirring stick, and it can continue to be used. An electric resin mixer can complete stirring in about 1 minute, and there will be fewer bubbles, which is more efficient than a stirring stick. The stirring paddle can also be wiped clean with the tissue. Wrong mixing method. The stirring range is too small and the resin on the walls and bottom of the cup are not stirred, which will cause the resin not be fully cured. There will be a lot of bubbles if the direction of the stirring is not consistent. Stirring too fast will cause a lot of large bubbles and it will be difficult to defoam. The mixed resin will automatically defoam after standing for 2 minutes. You can use the following 2 methods if there are still some bubbles on the surface. Pick away the bubbles with the stirring stick. Keep a distance of 5 to 6 centimeters between the lighter and the resin, and then quickly switch the lighter on to defoam. The resin will become thicker in winter. Give the resin a warm water bath at about 50 degrees Celsius for 1 to 2 minutes. The resin is ready to use when it becomes a fluid liquid as usual. Color mixing of resin. Resin can be mixed with many kinds of liquid pigment. The first one is resin dye, including translucent resin dye, opaque resin dye, macaron resin dye, and alcohol ink. This allows you to achieve transparent or solid color effects. Please do not add more than 6% of the total volume of the mixed resin, otherwise it may cause resin not cured correctly. The second is pigment powder, including mica powder, chameleon mica powder, etc. It can give a sparkling effect and is often used in crafting tabletops and wooden projects. The third is glitter, which can create a sparkling effect. Colors and types can be freely matched, and it is suitable for embellishment in resin for decoration. The fourth is chunky glitters. The chunky glitters are popular because they give a shimmering look to the craft. There are many types, including glow in the dark glitter and opal chunky glitter. It's recommended to choose relatively small and lightweight chunky glitters. If the chunky glitters are too large or heavy, they may sink to the bottom of the resin and not achieve the desired floated effect. Here's an additional tip to prevent the chunky glitters from sinking. When the resin is at room temperature, it is not thick enough for the chunky glitters to float and tends to sink. However, the resin will be thicker when it reaches 45 to 50 degrees. Then add the chunky glitters. The thicker resin will cure faster and it will keep the chunky glitters not sinking. The fifth is brushing mica powder onto the mold directly. After that, we recommend pouring clear or black resin, which will make the color brushed on the mold more vivid. By the way, the eyeshadow brush would be a good choice for brushing. You can use any kinds of powders to brush the color, such as mica powder, chameleon powder, metallic powder, and so on. Defoaming techniques. Pour a small amount of resin into the mold first, and shake it evenly to allow the resin to flow into every corner of the mold. This can help reduce the bubbles in small corners of the mold. Then you can continue pouring the resin. For tiny and barely visible bubbles, you can use a flashlight to observe. The bubbles will be seen and removed easily. Small bubbles stuck in the bottom can be popped with a sharp object. I prefer using dental floss. It's quite convenient for this purpose. For deep molds, it is recommended pouring resin in layers as it is easy for bubbles to get stuck in some of the smaller corners. It will be difficult to remove bubbles if the resin in the mold is too full. We can use a flashlight to check the bubbles in the corners and then squeeze this part to remove the bubbles. We can fill the mold with resin after the bubbles are released. Tap the mold a few times to bring the bubbles from the depths to the surface. If it's a small group of bubbles floating on the surface, you can use a stirring stick to pick them out, which will be more efficient. Heat gun is not recommended for beginners to remove bubbles, as it is more likely to damage the mold. Prevention of resin delamination and resin type selection. Many people encounter a common issue when creating large resin pieces and layers. There are noticeable seam marks at the resin boundary lines. Here are 2 suggestions to help you avoid this problem. The first suggestion is to use the same bottle of resin throughout the entire creation process. While many commercial resins may seem similar, variations can occur between different production batches, leading to slight density differences. Using the same bottle of resin for an entire project helps ensure consistency in density. The second suggestion is to ensure that the resin mixing ratio remains consistent with each layer. Inconsistent ratios in resin mixing can lead to variations in density during the curing process, resulting in noticeable dividing line. There will always be some slight seam marks at the interface, and it's challenging to completely avoid them. We can just minimize their visibility as much as possible. Hope these tips are helpful to you. The curing time. For thicknesses of 5 to 8 millimeters, it will take about 6 to 8 hours to cure. Fully curing time is 12 to 16 hours. For a thickness of 20 millimeters, it will take 4 to 6 hours to cure. Fully curing time is 8 to 12 hours. For molds with greater depth and intricate patterns, it is recommended to use deep pore resin. The deep pore resin is thinner in consistency, making it difficult to have air bubbles in molds with crevices and details. Additionally, deep pore resin is also suitable for creating larger pieces, as it is less likely to have flash cure. If you want to create a phone stand or a wine rack, it is recommended to use tabletop resin, because it have a higher hardness, providing better weight-bearing capacity. If you want to create small jewelry pieces or keychains, it's recommended to use fast cure resin. This is because small and thin projects may take longer to cure, but you can get the cure projects in approximately 6 to 8 hours with fast cure resin. 5. Cleaning par. Cleaning up the workspace is also important. Here are some tips for cleaning. 1. Hands. You can rub it with alcohol and wash it with soapy water at the end. 2. Desktop. Spray alcohol on the resin spill area and wipe clean with paper towels. 3. If the mold is stuck with cured resin particles, you can use tape to peel them away. 4. If glitters or gold foil is stuck to the mold, you can also use tape to remove it. If mica powder is stuck to the mold, you can use alcohol to wipe it off. Safety precautions. 1. Please wear impermeable gloves while working with resin. 2. If resin comes into contact with hands, please wipe it clean with alcohol and then wash it with soapy water. 3. In case of accidental contact with resin to the eyes, rinse immediately with water and seek medical attention if necessary. 4. Store uncured resin in a high place to prevent accidental contact by children and avoid contact with food. That's all for the beginner tutorial on epoxy resin. If you're interested in learning more about resin and its applications, don't forget to follow us and stay tuned for more updates.